The first console I ever had growing up was a Wii. I remember that me and my sister got it for Christmas one year, a bundle with both Wii Sports and Wii Sports Resort. Up until that time, me and my sister had mostly just played Mario Flash games on our computer, but wanted to play a real authentic one. Since my parents didn't know much about gaming at the time, they got us an additional 2 games, Super Mario Galaxy 2, and the reason I'm making this video today, Endless Ocean Blue World. This is my second favorite video game of all time, only after the original Xenoblade Chronicles. Given that I know this game insanely well, I'd like to take the time to make a comprehensive review of the entire series, with my focus being mostly on Blue World. Oh, and if it wasn't already apparent, I will be spoiling every game in this video, so here's your warning now. Before we get to that though, let's dive in, pun entirely intended, to the original. While I didn't play the first game until a while later, it was only a matter of time. There's a lot of comparisons to be made between it and Blue World, so I'm going to wait until later to discuss those differences in detail. Instead, let's focus on the individual aspects of the OG iteration. Your story starts on the Gabbiano, a boat that serves as the main hub sailing the seas of Manoa Lai. You're here alongside Catherine, a lady who can't swim because she's afraid to, so it's up to you to dive in and explore. While the in-game reason you come aboard is for a topography survey, she has another goal which becomes the central point of the story. Her main ambition is to follow in the footsteps of her father and try to discover the Ancient Mother, a giant whale he was unable to find before dying in a diving accident. Interestingly enough, it's considered taboo by the locals to go looking for it, and yet Catherine and her dad try to anyway. Cause who needs respect for local traditions? Not her, apparently. Honestly, it didn't even take any more than like a day or two to clear the main story. It pretty much just involves going around the map, clearing certain objectives, and exploring some sub-areas along the way. It doesn't eat up any more of your time than it needs to, which is fine because the main draw of the game isn't the story. That comes from the gameplay. What I've always loved about the Endless Ocean games is the satisfaction of going for completion. While not officially stated as much, your main goal in essence is to complete the marine encyclopedia. Whether in the sea or on the deck of the Gabbiano itself, your goal is to find all the fish. Rather befitting of a chill ocean game, this is a task that's most fun when achieved by just roaming around and gradually finding new creatures to add to your collection. While you will eventually start to have trouble finding certain species, there are guides hanging around online which can help you to find the last handful of critters. I wish the game offered you some post-game ability to track down certain species, but alas, without the internet you just have to brute force a few. Outside of the basic gameplay, you can break up the monotony by taking guests on guided tours, playing with dolphin partners, and searching for treasures. The most meaningful of these is the guided tours, where you'll have to take a visiting diver around to see a requested fish. You'll please the client the more fish you find, with a bonus for finding the creature of their desires. While you aren't given a letter grade, Catherine does interject to let you know if the client is happy or thrilled with the experience. While a happy experience is a passing grade, you'll want to get them thrilled to get a 5-star rating. This is your main way of getting new gear, which can be somewhat time-consuming, but gives you an incentive to get your lay of the land, sea. Lay of the sea? You get what I mean. The more you know the usual wildlife, the easier your life doing guided tours becomes. Now, as you play through the game, you will start getting introduced to various dolphin partners. While you can train them and dive with them as partners, they're more of a fun little feature than anything that will genuinely help you to 100% the game. The only real gripe I have is that despite the game having 8 partners you can befriend, only 3 can be registered at a time. If you want to recruit a 4th, you have to cut ties with one of your existing cetacean compadres, which I'd like to add you are prompted to name. Oh, sorry bottlenose dolphin I've known since the first time I booted up the game. You're being replaced with this other dude I just met. Friendship ended with bottlenose dolphin. Resso's dolphin is my new best friend. This is such a weird and unnecessary feature that ruins the otherwise fun prospect of befriending all 8 species. The last big feature of the game is the treasures you can collect, known in-game as salvage. You first collect the dolphin medal as part of the story, unlocking the footlocker. You can open this whenever to view the various salvage items you've collected. Most of them don't really do all that much, But if you manage to find the shark tooth necklace, you'll be able to encounter one of Endless Ocean's 2 legendary creatures. If you go to the ship's rest sub-area at night, you'll find a giant great white by the name of Magutapa. Since the only other legendary creature in the game is the Ancient Mother, his inclusion feels surprising, but appreciated nonetheless. Endless Ocean has 2 kinds of treasures, ones that show up in specific locations, and those that are completely random. Salvage found in specific locations are found either intact or as fragments. While they are admittedly a bit frustrating to find at times, there is some satisfaction in finding all the parts and getting yourself a complete treasure. I cannot extend that same compliment to the random salvage items. I'll talk about those in a second, because it's time to talk about completion. As a collectathon, the main appeal of the game is finding everything the game has to offer. Sure, there's some satisfaction in completing the story, but realistically, you'll only need to boot the game a few times to reach that milestone. To me, there are 2 ways to 100% this game: 100%ing the Marine Encyclopedia, and 100%ing everything, including all the diving gear and salvage. Let's go over the Marine Encyclopedia first. To me, finding the Ancient Mother isn't the main appeal of Endless Ocean. It's being able to say you found all the fish in the game. Most animals you will be able to find without too much issue, so long as you're exploring thoroughly. Many creatures can only be found in what I think the game calls zoom mode, but I've always just called them glowies. When you click on a glowy, you can find a variety of new fish not normally visible, and collect some salvage if you're lucky. The game also has a season system, with certain creatures appearing depending on the time of year. Now, this isn't like Animal Crossing. It uses the in-game day and night system rather than the actual time of year. This thankfully makes it much easier to leap forward through the season to look for species, while also mixing up the variety of creatures to encounter. With enough time, energy, and probably the assistance of a guide or 2, you will eventually be met with this. Congratulations, sir! You have just found every creature in Endless Ocean! Oh wow, what do I win? Nothing! Now go find every fish 2 more times! Wait, what? Yeah, so there's a mechanic where you have to pat or feed the fish to unlock additional information about them. You have to do this 3 times for every creature in the game, which at first I didn't have that much of a problem with. Each piece of info can be gained once per dive for an individual creature, so you can knock out a lot of them at once. I mentioned earlier that learning about areas is useful for guided tours, and since you will need to click on a lot of fish during these tours, plenty of areas can have their local wildlife cataloged passively. It gives you a reason to click on various fish during subsequent dives. But this loses all enjoyment once you get to the rarer species. See, there are many creatures found in glowies that aren't guaranteed to spawn, especially those found in the sub-areas. For example, allow me to introduce you to the absolute bane of my existence, the Yatabe Blenny. It only spawns in the interior of the Moya Atoll ruins, specifically at the place where the ceiling meets the walls. Not only does it appear rather rarely, since, again, these glowies appear randomly, there's a chance you won't have it appear in the right place at all. I remember when attempting this, I repeated the same process over and over. Dive near the entrance and navigate my way inside. Swim through the area with the open roof and enter the correct doorway. Scope out every glowy I could find in the entire building interior. Return to the boat. Dive in again. Swim to the opening. Check the interior. Return to the boat. Rinse and repeat. This would have been tedious enough with one species, but I had to do this 3 times with similarly difficult to find creatures in other sub-areas too. There were 2 variants of frogfish to find in the sand surrounding the ruins. There was the crystal jelly, which supposedly spawns in several sub-areas as well as near the entrance to Deep Valley, but took an eternity to find even once. This is where the single biggest flaw of the Endless Ocean series rears its ugly head: tediousness. To be clear, I still find a majority of the series to be greatly enjoyable, but there are some ridiculous things you have to do to reach 100% completion. I really wish the first game offered you some kind of reward for finding every creature at least once, and I would personally recommend striving to do so before you put the game down and move on. That to me is the most fun way to play the game, and I suggest you not waste hours of your life trying to get a handful of creatures to spawn, unless you're determined to get that final reward like I was. And yes, when I say I actually did 100% the game's Marine Encyclopedia, everything seen thrice and all. Now the game actually gives you a reward. A cutscene with Catherine will play, granting you the ability to place the Ancient Mother in the aquarium. I consider this the penultimate achievement in the game, and why I will say I have 100% Endless Ocean 1. But What if I told you that wasn't even the most tedious thing in the game? The single worst thing to attempt to complete, not just in the first game, but in my opinion, in the entirety of the Endless Ocean series, is the salvage collection. Some salvage appears in pre-designated spots. That's fine. The problem is, only 19 of the 47 salvage treasures function this way. The rest appear completely randomly. And what's worse, you can get repeats that do absolutely nothing! Every sub-area has 4 random salvage spawns, except for the ruins with 3. By the time I completed everything in the game, which took roughly an in-game year, I only had 6 random salvage items to my name. Here's how I think it works. Certain areas have a chance to spawn one of the treasure items in a glowy. Given your pointer has to move over them to become visible, you have to essentially scrape against the seabed to find them. These already rare collectibles become incredibly easy to miss as a result. Because the 2 shells appear more often than everything else in the main hub, they'll likely be all you find. There is an exploit involving the secret lake, thankfully. Because the lake and nearby sandy area count as one entity, you'll be able to find all of the main area's salvage much quicker. It'll still take hours of scouring and patience, but at least it's something. Online guides have suggested events such as diver quests or exploring on Tonga Day can improve your chances. Personal experience leads me to believe this is probably just confirmation bias. As of this recording, I'm still attempting to complete my collection. I found all the random Manoa Lai items, with sub-areas seeing progress, albeit slow. If I have anything new to report, I'll put it somewhere in the video. All in all, I hate to say it, but the original Endless Ocean feels like it's missing something. Maybe the story could have been a bit more fleshed out. Maybe there could have been an easier way to collect items. Maybe there could have been an easier way to complete the Marine Encyclopedia. Maybe the salvage collection would be fun to complete if the items weren't so unnecessarily hard to find. It's not a bad game by any means. If you're looking for a nice collectathon and just want to play to see every fish at least once, you will probably walk away from the game with an overall positive experience. For how much I've complained about it over the past couple minutes, I do think this game still deserves a reasonable 7 out of 10. The music and visuals are stellar. The inclusion of scientific names is great, with some fairly robust scientific information to boot. And if you're looking for a casual exploration game, it will give you plenty to do for a considerable number of hours. Luckily, virtually every problem I had was rectified by the absolute masterpiece that was the sequel, Endless Ocean Blue World. Other than one small exception I'll get to in a moment, Blue World surpasses the original in every conceivable way. The music, the gameplay, the story, the post-game, it's all phenomenal. And yes, that's the order we'll be going through for this comparison. This is the section where the 2 games are most on par in my opinion. Both of them utilize songs sung by a New Zealander by the name of Hayley Westenra. While the first game has a variety of songs from her solo career, Blue World has a selection from her time as part of the Celtic music group Celtic Woman. Not to get too sidetracked, but while I was working on this section, I ended up falling down a little rabbit hole because Hayley has done some really impressive things. Endless Ocean is far from her crowning achievement, oh no. Get this! Not only did she perform as part of Celtic Woman for Queen Elizabeth and George W. Bush on separate occasions, but she also became the youngest ever ambassador for UNICEF. For those unaware, that's the United Nations International Children's Emergency Fund. She did this campaign called Bikes for Ghana, where young girls in the country were given 6,000 bikes to be able to travel to and from school and get an education. Like, damn, you go, girl! While I do feel more of a connection with the song selection from the second game, that in no way represents the quality of those selected. What matters to me is how and when Endless Ocean chooses to play them. In the original, they typically will play during specific scenes and upon a first visit to a sub-area. Something I haven't mentioned until now is that both entries were also given their own original soundtrack to complement Hayley's vocal tracks. Not only do they both mesh exceptionally well, but it makes important moments feel that extra bit special. Blue World handles this better in my opinion, saving them for important moments in the story, which elevates the majesty and emotion. In 1, this effect isn't really achieved to quite the same degree, but it's by no means absent. There's a certain joy in exploring a new area, with a beautiful vocal track to capture the beauty of the moment. For how much I've complained about Moaya Atoll, it's actually my favorite introduction in the original. You have to navigate the corridors and figure out how to break open a crack in the roof, accompanied by Haley's cover of Amazing Grace, my favorite solo work of hers. I just want to cut in and make a note that Catherine's response to you accidentally damaging a culturally significant archaeological site is a simple, "Oh, crud!" Well, that's okay, it was an accident. Furthermore, while I was researching this area, it turns out one of her responses to finding this ruin was, quote, "Take that, snooty academic types." Combined with the lack of respect for local customs shown previously, I'm starting to have my reservations about this woman. The way Blue World handles the vocal tracks is a bit different. While areas like Valka Castle and the Cortica River will have a unique song played on a first dive, most areas don't get this treatment. Like, whenever you reach the end of a particular story segment, you'll usually be treated to the prayer and a whale coming into view. This placement feels more selected and deliberate than in the first game, and it pays off quite well in my opinion. The only gripe I can really think of is that one exception I mentioned where the predecessor outdoes the sequel. I always loved diving in the Cortica River for the first time, as you get treated to Dulamon, a song about Ireland having the tastiest seaweed in the world, and it's in Gaelic, and it's peak. I've always felt it was an incredible fit for the Cortica River, given it's a rainforest. Seaweed, plants, jungle, you get it, right? Unfortunately, every subsequent visit will not bless you with this beautiful piece of Irish folk history. As a kid, I always wanted the option to play it again in the Cortica River, but the best the game allows is a jukebox on Nineball Island. In Endless Ocean 1, you actually get to choose between the standard music from the soundtrack or any of Haley's works you discover during the game. For some reason, this feature is just completely absent from Blue World, which is a shame because I would have loved the opportunity to do so. While Blue World functionally controls just about the same as the original, there are a few tweaks to the button mapping that improve the overall experience. The most notable for me is the way the player interacts with glowies, as in the original, you had to press plus to zoom in on them. In fact, most surfaces can be observed more closely. I don't really know why they even implemented this. If you aren't zooming into a glowy, there's nothing to find or collect. I often found it awkward trying to inspect them, accidentally clicking on some random patch of sand on several occasions. Collecting treasure also felt unnatural, requiring you to press both A and B to grab the object. Blue World solved both these issues. Interacting with objects was standardized to the A button, which helps the game flow much more smoothly. Plus, instead of a couple static and randomized treasures, there are now 100 coins to collect that always appear in the same spot in every playthrough. If you want to complete your collection, you need to scour each and every area thoroughly. It encourages the player to explore, helping to fill in the gaps in your marine encyclopedia along the way. While difficult, each and every coin collected is a little dopamine rush I find gratifying. Also, glowies appear visibly from a distance without needing to hover over them. Thank God for that! One other change I liked was the change to the quick turn. Rather than shaking the Wii remote in the original game, double tapping the B button will let you quickly spin around 180 degrees. I used to accidentally do this as a kid while swimming with the B button. As an adult though, I didn't really have this problem since it was less strenuous on my joints to rely on auto swim. The first game also had auto swim, but used minus instead of plus. I think it ever so slightly feels more natural, not having to move my thumb as far. If there's anything the sequel improves upon more than anything, it's the fundamental difference in the way dives work. I always found the dive radius mechanic in the first game to be unnecessarily constricting. There was more than one occasion where I wanted to check something and couldn't because an invisible wall was in the way. The biggest example of this being a problem is with the pirate ship. It randomly shows up in one of 3 locations, and if you want to board it, there's a fairly high likelihood it will spawn outside your radius. Oops, looks like you picked wrong, better go back to the boat, manually move the Gabbiano to your desired location, and dive all over again. I'm not sure if this was implemented for rendering purposes or something, but otherwise, I find no reason for this unnecessary hindrance. Blue World, on the other hand, sports a variety of unique locations to explore. There was very little I found samey about the level design, other than Canada and the Weddell Sea being aesthetically ice-heavy with lots of areas to go ashore. You have Gatama Atoll, a shallow coral reef. You have Cicero's Strait, an area highly variable in verticality, home to a variety of sharks such as great whites, hammerheads, and even basking sharks. You have the Cortica River, a freshwater ecosystem full of iconic Amazonian species. And of course, you have the Zahab region, host to two of the most iconic sub-areas in the game. While there was certainly some variance in the first game, these locations make the adventure all the more engaging and memorable. The design of these areas feels more thoughtful too, notably the Zahab region depths. One issue I had with the Abyss in the first game was how simple it was. It's basically just a hole with two connecting paths on either side of the chasm. Given your limited vision in the darkness, I found it a bit difficult to gauge where you're going. The depths, on the other hand, are far more confined, with the tighter spaces offering a better sense of verticality. There's a lot less open space to stumble around blindly in, and with two trenches to explore, the sub-area feels more dynamic and easier to traverse. There's a lot more to do above the bottom too, with different varieties of fish, glowies, and even salvage to be found at most elevations in both crevices. My enjoyment of the two deep ocean sub-areas is just night and day. As for the main gameplay elements, let's hop on over to the table for a look. Let's start with the Marine Encyclopedia. To find a lot of smaller creatures, you'll need to enlist the help of Oceana. When you dive with her, she causes more glowies to spawn. Not only does this make it easier to find rarer species, but she's actually required to complete your coin collection. I'm like 99% sure some are restricted to glowies that only spawn with Oceana in tow. This makes her a great partner on your first visit to a region, and a must when you plan to go coin hunting. When talking to her in the main hub, Nineball Island, she serves as the basis for guided tours. Now, they function relatively similar to the original game with some added caveats. Each client still wants to see a specific creature, but to get an excellent score, you also need to interact with creatures a certain number of times. As I discovered in my most recent playthrough, this is extremely cheesable if you know how. The most flexible method goes like this. Find an area with multiple fish species and feed them. Close out of the food mode and begin clicking back and forth between the different species. When interacting with a species by patting or feeding them, the game typically will give a little jingle to indicate a positive reaction. Normally, repeating such an action will not cause the jingle to play, which I assume is to stop you from constantly farming interactions off of one animal. So long as you click back and forth between the same type of creature, you will not get credit for it. However, when you change species, this failsafe does not occur. By feeding a group and clicking back and forth between different fish, you can farm this incredibly easily. I found Volca Castle to be one of my favorite places to do this, as it features a variety of large fish species in one area. The underwater gallery is an especially great place to farm, having swarms of surgeonfish, clown wrasse, mahi-mahi, and groupers. I call this the most flexible method because it works in a good number of locations, but it's not the most effective method. Client requests already come with a destination in mind, and some are definitely better ideas than others. Canada and the Iceberg Cavern are especially terrible due to a lack of species diversity. One time I was trying to give Canada a shot, and after clicking on a bluefin tuna, they actually dragged me so far from my client, it triggered the "you lost your client" dialogue. Basically, if they get stuck on something or whatever, the game will start playing intense music and instruct you to find them immediately. Even after finding them, this will cost you some points. Needless to say, I did not do guided tours there again. If you're looking for the best place to do them, surprisingly, that honor goes to the Zahab region depths. Here, you can find animals that glow. Specifically, let's take a look at the Popeye Grenadier. When you click on one during a tour, you'll get a jingle as your dive partner comments on their glow. While in food mode, you can also pat and poke creatures to get extra interactions out of them, even after feeding them. The glowing functions the same way, but requires no additional player input. In other words, by feeding a grenadier over and 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 over, you can hit maximum happiness with minimal effort. The amount of money you make will always be $5,800 more than the base reward, so long as you hit the cap on bonus funds. From my testing, with a fairly high diving level and a few oxygen upgrades, I was able to hit the cap after about 5 to 6 bars of oxygen being depleted. Depending on your equipment, the amount of time you need will vary, but for the effort, it's easily the fastest and easiest way to max out on bonus cash. A ton of Popeye Grenadiers spawn in the secret passage, so all you need to do is dive down there and press A a bajillion times. Grenadiers are a common choice for clients too, which makes the strategy all the better. Know what else is a common choice? Vampire Squid. And they're even easier! Arguably. See, in addition to glowing, they also curl up when poked. Rather than constantly feeding it, The same effect can be achieved by constantly shaking the Wii remote. If your fingers get tired of pressing A repeatedly, all you need to do is select one, open up the food tab, and shake over and over and over and over and over and over. We're not doing that again. This stupidly easy strategy completely trivializes guided tours, and even if you don't hit the cap, it makes grinding for the 20 excellent tours achievement much easier. Oh, and you can use pinecone fish in Deep Hole in the same way as the Grenadiers. You're welcome. Moving on, let's talk about salvage. While it was easily the worst part of the original game, Blue World flips that on its head and makes it one of the best. Rather than looking for salvage in glowies, you can find salvage in the overworld. May I introduce the multi-sensor? Using advanced sonar, this splendorific invention can pick up all sorts of amazing oddities. Spheres, boxes, paintings, literal statues, you name it, you can find it. This thing is so much fun. You can just go around and pick up random stuff to try expanding your collection. There's different types of items and each area contains different varieties, so it never hurts to collect stuff when you're going about whatever business you're attending to. Or after you finish it. Or before it. Whenever you feel like it, free money is sitting right there. Salvage is the specialty of Gaston Gray, or GG as he likes to be called. Out of the entire cast, he's easily my favorite dive partner. Using his built-in salvager's sense, he can tell you exactly how many items are within a 100-meter radius, and how many unique items are yet to be found in a given map. Since your collection record only shows how many you found overall, he can help to inform your next course of action to work towards 100%. There's also an additional passive ability he has that makes him even more valuable. At base, you can only hold 5 items. Thankfully, you can use the radio to contact Nancy and buy up to 10 extra storage spaces. She appraises everything you get, which adds a bit of excitement to see whether your haul is a hit or a bust. By default, diving with GG grants you an extra 5 storage spaces no matter what, letting you hold up to 20 items at once. Whether you prefer to salvage all at once or grab stuff bit by bit, GG is your man. He's got you. The salvage requests you get from him are highly enjoyable too. When you collect the requested item, rather than eating up an inventory slot and requiring an appraisal, you get a text box saying, "You salvaged the thing." I really appreciate that you're able to pick them up without standard inventory limits being an issue. If you want to go on a treasure hunt while satisfying a client, both can occur in tandem seamlessly. Out of your human partners, you'll probably be using Hayako the least. Her ability allows you to track down certain species and re-watch scenes already viewed in a given region. Compared to Oceana and GG, she will probably see only minimal use in a standard playthrough. I mostly used her in the late game, as I needed to dive with her to check which scenes I was missing. I think her utility is best for new players, as she can detect animals within your general vicinity. If you pop open the map screen, undiscovered species appear as question marks, a feature even I use to pinpoint the location of some troublesome species. It's really the aquarium and dolphin training where her character shines the best. The aquarium uses the same fundamentals as the first game, but it's been fleshed out a good bit. You're told to attain 1 million visitors to secure funding for the aquarium, and the game wants you to fill a variety of tanks to satisfy and bring in more people. I never achieved this as a kid. For some reason I thought I had to get 1 million visitors at once rather than collectively. As long as you update the aquarium every couple in-game days, the amount of daily visitors will gradually go up. For some reason, if you get too close to 5,000 visitors a day, the game automatically drops your average down about roughly 1k. I don't know the exact number, but it seems like a design feature to make sure you don't complete the goal too quickly. Not really something I find necessary, but the purpose makes sense at least. The in-game reason for this happening, I kid you not, is a drop in attendance due to a global recession. What do you mean there's a recession in my comfy ocean game? I got to achieve 1 million visitors for the first time in my most recent playthrough, allowing me to see a special cutscene I had never seen before. Getting to see the cast actually walking around in the aquarium celebrating the milestone brought me a great sense of joy and satisfaction. While it's not the most engaging part of the game, I'm happy that this cute little sandbox was developed upon. I never felt compelled to use the aquarium in the first game other than to put 4 ancient mothers together. Blue World giving the player a goal, and more to customize, improves the concept substantially. The dolphins are a similar story. The number of available partners increased from 8 in the original to 11, and this time, there's no partner limit. Again, I really don't know why it was capped at 3. You get 2 of them during the natural progression of the story, the short-beaked common dolphin right from the get-go, and the spectacled porpoise during the Weddell Sea storyline. Gradually, you'll get to unlock a string of side quests, where you'll have to train your dolphins and put on a certain number of dolphin shows to progress. Doing so adds new entries to your notebook, encouraging you to look into scenarios involving peculiar cetaceans. Complete the quest, and you get a new buddy. After 20 shows, you unlock the beluga, who in turn immediately unlocks the false killer whale. After this, the quests for the final 5 become available, and you're able to recruit them in any order at your leisure. In theory, diving with them is supposed to offer a benefit in the form of seeking out specific things. The narwhal seeks out sculptures, the beluga seeks out paintings in small rings, stuff like that. In practice, however, I never really saw this preference exemplified, nor did I feel like it needed to. If I wanted to find treasure, I just left the multisensor running perpetually and that worked fine for me. I left it running collectively for over 14 hours. Every time I hear the word multisensor, that one soundbite plays in my head. There's also an issue with one of the should-be best partners in the game, the bottlenose. It's supposed to find coins, but keep in mind that Oceania is required for a substantial number of them. While I love the option to dive with the dolphins, I can't dive with them alongside Oceania. Whatever utility it has is simply kneecapped for that reason. Regardless, every dolphin lets you grab onto them, effectively serving as a complicated run button to traverse a map quickly. Even if their intended purposes are mostly irrelevant, it's still gratifying to befriend and dive with them all. Notice I said intended purposes. I did find it more beneficial to dive with certain species more than others, albeit for more subtle purposes. Your beluga being pure white makes it incredibly easy to spot, and was often my partner of choice for the Zahab region depths. It's easy to lose track of your dive partner down there, and I have on many occasions. The sharp color contrast improves my ability to keep tabs on them. Size is another factor. While most dolphins often get stuck trying to get through the doors of Volca Castle, the Commerson's dolphin has by far the smallest hitbox. While intended to be valuable for hunting down chests, its tiny size allows you both to maneuver through tight spaces and see more of the map while riding. Objectively, the best of the bunch has to be the Amazon River dolphin. She actually has a special purpose, being able to move the branches blocking access to Queen's Lake. Removing this barrier allows for several things: the completion of the Corica River's map, the completion of the freshwater encyclopedia section, as you can now interact with Amazonian manatees, the quest to find Mama Corica gets unlocked, and there's even a coin to be found on the lake bed for your troubles. Personally, my favorite has to be the orca. Everything about this guy is just comedy gold. He's immediately shown to be playful, and you have to buy a float from Nancy to give him. Upon giving the gift, he is now your friend. Compared to the other dolphin partners, he's massive. The game makes a note that he's a bit smaller than the other orcas, which I find super amusing because I feel like I'm being let in on an inside joke among the developers. A typical orca in Blue World is so big, running around on one simply wouldn't have been possible. There's too many narrow gaps an adult would simply clip through, potentially with the player in tow. The boy's too goddamn big! For me, he's easily top tier simply because his size means it is very difficult to lose him, and by far the easiest to click on. Smaller animals, especially those that move around, can be a bit of a pain to try clicking on at times, especially for repeated pulsar hits. Your orca will not have this problem. The funniest bit is when you use him for dolphin training. Beefy boy. Look at him, he is my son. He's so obviously performing moves intended for smaller models, and that leads to some really funny things happening. The first time you train him and ask him to jump, he barely even escapes the water. What struck me the most was during a dolphin show when he performs a backflip. Jumps and backflips during shows will have them jump over the boat, rather than in front of it. If you instruct your orca to do a super backflip, you'll get to see him rotate absurdly fast and freak out in the corner of the screen before splashdown. Understandably, I decided to name him Rascal. Every dolphin you meet will allow you to name them. Here's a few I chose and why. Avens gets its name from a tundra flower called the mountain avens, a choice made in reference to the flower-like markings spread across its upper body. The presence of these plants help paleontologists determine how far tundra conditions spread in the late Pleistocene, or ice ages. In fact, Their genus name, Dryas, is where the name of the younger Dryas cooling event came from. Cordelia is named after a Fire Emblem character, who wields a lance and has a strong association with the color red. Pebenista is named after an extinct river dolphin, Pebenista yakaruna. While not believed to be ancestral to the modern Amazon river dolphin, it did call the western Amazon home during the Miocene, roughly about 16 million years ago. And then there's the Rissos dolphin. I called him Squid Icarus. One thing that changed about training between titles is how you get your partner to perform moves. Rather than using the Wii remote to touch a certain body part or shake the remote in a certain way, Blue World uses a much simpler method. You touch the dolphin anywhere, then a screen with their tricks pops up. They can be selected either by pointer or with the D-pad. If you want to get even lazier, you can just click free training in the bottom right and let them practice independently. There is a limit to how much they'll improve in one day, so you can't abuse it for too long, but it makes grinding much simpler. If I needed a bathroom break, I could just let them play around in the meantime. Train enough, and Hayako will offer to examine their abilities. If the tricks reach the right height, or last long enough, you'll level up. You start at level 1 and go up to level 3. The level determines how many tricks you can do at a time, and you need to reach level 2 in order to pass the dolphin show. The shows are pretty simple. They ask for a specific trick at the start, and a combo at the end. Really, they're not all that hard, but alas, this part of the game is brought down by jank. With each level comes new versions of the basic tricks, which you're supposed to activate by shaking the Wii remote harder. Shake it weakly to get the base trick. Shake it moderately for level 2, shake it a lot for level 3, you get the gist. I'd often shake as hard as I could to get the level 3 trick, but only have the first swing register and get the basic version. For the most part, this isn't a huge deal, but you're supposed to be able to achieve a higher level trick at the end for a specific combo. Failing this with a level 2 dolphin will lead to your client becoming unhappy. Luckily, failing with a level 3 dolphin basically doesn't matter. There was a point where I failed the final combo because the Wii remote didn't register properly, but I still got the jingle for an excellent show. See, if you perform 3 tricks at a time every chance you get, you basically cannot fail even if your combo gets screwed up. By contrast, a level 2 dolphin requires you to get everything right, and usually will only result in a good rating. There was one time where a level 2 of mine hit excellent, but that was because I got like 6 to 8 new records, which also boosts client enjoyment. I'll put it bluntly. Getting excellent with a level 2 is very jank and RNG dependent, while getting excellent with a level 3 is far too easy. Regardless, there is still some fun to be had, and training a partner to max level is greatly satisfying. They each unlock a signature trick for doing so even if you're not a fan of the shows, it's still rewarding to help your buddies along. Speaking of jank, let's talk about photo requests. While unable to join you in the water, John Eric does at least get a few ways to contribute. When speaking to him directly, he will pass along inquiries regarding photography. Using your camera, you're able to track down a specific animal or landmark, snap a photo, and voila! It's on the front of a magazine. Simple, right? Alas, there are some fundamental flaws with the way this operates that hinder it significantly. One small issue I had was the way you submit them. Rather than providing a photo directly from the camera, you have to add it to your photo album first. This is a problem because there's not a lot of space in there to begin with, and I would often have to delete old photos. Furthermore, you can't actually look at your photos until you return to Nineball Island. Taking a picture during a dive only gives you a flash of black and the sound of the camera snapping. When dealing with moving targets, it can be especially frustrating if the subject didn't cooperate well enough to get in frame as hoped. Even if it does work out, you have to render the photos to get a halfway decent preview of its contents. It just wastes time and adds unnecessary tedium. The worst part is these problems would be a lot less noteworthy were it not for the rating system. This ranks as easily one of my biggest gripes with Blue World, and to my knowledge, it's a sentiment shared by most players. Growing up, me and my sister never understood how it operated. Some seemingly great photos would fail outright, while random terrible ones would apparently do well. To discern what was going on under the hood, I decided to look at what the game itself asks of the player. It talks about a rule of thirds and filling the photo, but what that entailed flew right over my head as a kid. I'm happy to report I figured it out. Let me break it down for you. Imagine the camera's view like this. The rule of thirds is basically asking you to mentally overlay a 3x3 grid. You'll want to line up the eye of the creature with one of these intersecting points, while actively letting it fill up the camera. You're also encouraged to utilize special focus options, which I used to help ensure a high rank. Turns out, the problem is not a lack of consistency. The problem is, meeting the criteria with certain species is consistently impossible! For example, I tried to get a photo of a silver arowana. Clicking on it directly kept the player too far away, even when fully zoomed in, to have the fish occupy any meaningful amount of the screen. Instead, I manually entered the camera mode while swimming normally, then swam into the fish to get as close as possible. This is basically what you have to do to get a decent photo of anything. Sure would have been nice to just click on the fish and let the autofocus do its thing, but no, most of the time, you have to swim manually into position. Despite getting as close as feasibly possible to the arowana, the picture failed because I wasn't able to fill the screen. The problem is even worse within glowies, as I learned with the sea spider. Some creatures are just too small to occupy enough of the screen to ever meet the requirements. I don't know how many are genuinely impossible, but the general rule is that the larger the animal, the easier it is to get an A rank. I found that whales are one of the best options, as their large size and predictable movements make them one of the easiest to get a photo of. Here's how you do it. Set your custom focus to one of the designated spots. Try to line up the eye of the creature in a way that fills up most of the image. Using this strategy, I was able to get A and B rank photos consistently. Even if they look objectively terrible, if the criteria are met, it should work. Take this for example. Look at how blurry this is. This was an A rank. As for schooling fish, they're a bit more complicated, but not in a bad way. Because multiple of the same species are on screen, it counts as getting filled. I think. Maybe. As long as one eye is in the general vicinity of the focal point, while using the rule of 3, it should work. This one got either an A or a B, I don't really remember. My favorite picture taken was of this Greenland shark. By some miracle, it got itself stuck on Hayako, preventing it from moving. I'm really happy this one got an A. The camera angle does wonders for the shot. Despite the jank and busted nature of the feature, working within these limitations to get a good photo was genuinely rewarding to me. There's not much in this game I'd describe as difficult on the basis of skill. So at least to me personally, I surprisingly got some enjoyment out of it. It's no salvage request, but there is some worth to be found in it. You know what this cozy ocean game is missing? A first-person shooter element! Behold, the pulsar. Get bored of clicking on fish? Now you can shoot them! Ethically. It's more like a kind of stun gun, relaxing and healing anything it hits. Some fish out there are injured, and when you equip the pulsar, you'll be able to heal their wounds by shooting them! Ethically. The more injured they are, the more pulses are required. You can also just pulse random fish if you feel like it, which I pretty much did all the time for fun. When you pulse at least 100 animals, John Eric will financially compensate you. This makes for an incredibly fun time killer, and spices up the variety of ways to have fun during a dive. There's also a combat aspect to it, with certain aggressive creatures being pacified by it. You get naturally introduced to the pulsar during the early game, requiring its usage to fend off the tiger shark in Deep Hole. Since you don't have a health bar, losing an interaction with a shark only impacts you by knocking down your remaining oxygen. In most cases, especially in the post-game, this penalty is completely inconsequential. Running out of air in a standard mission only forces you to return to the surface. You don't lose any items or collectibles for it. The only time it genuinely matters is during a select few parts of the story where you can't return to the surface. Volca Castle can be a bit worrisome on a first playthrough, but I've never actually run out of air there myself. Thanatos is one of the closest things to a true boss this game has. While he can't be outright sedated, you can still barrage him with pulses. If you miss out on getting his entry during the main story, he does swim around the wreck of the Emerald Lady afterwards. Fend off his shark companions, distract him with the pulsar, and you'll have the chance to add him to the encyclopedia. If you're looking to really test your skills, that comes at the story's conclusion. While the Sahab region depths makes you watch your oxygen levels constantly, you at least have the luxury of refueling it whenever you wish. The Cavern of the Gods offers no such courtesy. For the conclusion to a cozy ocean game, it has hands. There is surprisingly little room for error. I ran out of air on both my first and second playthroughs of the game. In my most recent run, even knowing the layout by heart, I only escaped with 1 bar of oxygen left. Granted, I barely had anything in the way of oxygen upgrades, but still, it's one hell of a difficulty spike. Now, the navigation and puzzle-solving aspects are one thing, but there's a reason I'm mentioning this in the Pulsar section. Endless Ocean Blue World has a final boss! After losing so much oxygen, you now have to fight off a giant goblin shark and its minions before you drown. I didn't even make it there on my first 2 playthroughs, but it can easily finish off a player who doesn't know how to adapt. I opted to swim up and over the Guardian, then use the quick turn to spin around and blast them with a pulsar. Calming them gives you the chance to activate part of the opening mechanism, which after 3 rounds opens the way to the treasure. The battle and dungeon sequence makes Blue World's ending so much more fun and memorable than the original. It's an enthralling way to bring your adventure to a close. Let's take a moment to appreciate how you got there. The game starts off with this incredible opening cutscene. Seeing all those whales gather to the tune of One World is such a perfect way to get you excited for what this masterpiece has to offer. Jumping back in time to the start of your journey, we meet John Eric and gradually learn the basics while exploring Gatama Atoll. We meet Oceana and go on a dive with her, where an encounter with a humpback takes a surprising turn. Dropping her pendant, it makes an odd sound that sends the mother whale into a frenzy. Oceana mentions that it's a memento of her mother and how she dropped the other half in Deep Hole as a kid. John Eric forbids her from going to Deep Hole given how dangerous it is, but first thing in the morning, she attempts to get it back. After rescuing her, she finds it has a message scratched into it. The road to the truth is the Song of Dragons. In an attempt to learn more, you set out across the globe in search of answers. You join forces with Gigi and Hayako, discover Volca Castle, and explore both of the poles. After a string of near disasters brought on by the Song of Dragons, John Eric calls off the search outright. We learn that he lost his son, Matthias, who also sought to discover the mystery of the song, but died in a submersible accident. He reluctantly agrees to let them explore the Zahab region depths. As Matthias had the last piece, the cast dives down to the wreckage of the submarine and finds a waterproof bag. Along with the final piece, it also contains a final letter from his son. John Eric had thought his son died hating him. Matthias wanted to keep searching despite his father's discouragement, which led to them going their separate ways. In the letter, however, it's clear he still loved his father dearly, giving the old sea captain some closure at long last. With the dragon flute assembled, they finally discover the location of the Pacifica treasure. It's here the scene from the game's opening plays once more, bringing everything full circle. After a strong current sucks them into the Cavern of the Gods, it's a race against time to solve the mystery of the ruins and escape before they run out of air. The cast is able to make it to the highest room on the map and see the treasure with their very eyes. They also realize the Song of Dragons is actually echoes, caused by whale calls reverberating around enclosed spaces. The whales hear the singing dragons, then proceed to bash against the walls to open the door to the treasure. Unfortunately, the mechanism to stop them broke, and the cast is forced to flee while the whole place collapses. Safe back on board the ship, the credits roll. This was an incredible step up from the original game's plot. As a silent protagonist, the story was pretty much just Catherine talking at you. Not with you, but at you about her ambitions. When you do find the Ancient Mother, it's just sort of like, yay, we did it, and that's it. Virtually every aspect of her character can be represented by John Eric, but in a far more thoughtful and impactful way. Catherine's dad died by getting caught in some kelp about 15 to 20 feet below the surface. I always felt his death was a bit contrived. This is incredibly shallow water, and I fail to see how one could get tangled in kelp so badly they would drown. Matthias's death feels much more natural to me, being stuck at the bottom of a trench about 500 feet down. John Eric also is impacted in a more complex way, as the loss of his son makes him fear for Oceana's safety. Even as early as Deep Hole, we get to see how much he worries for her. It's only natural for him to call off the search once he makes the connection between the Song of Dragons and sudden moments of peril the cast was encountering. The resolution with Matthias's last letter is probably my favorite emotional beat in the series. I always loved that we got to hear the last rose of summer play in the background while his final message is being read. Given that you're traveling around the world in search of an ancient treasure, the adventure always felt grand and engaging. The Cavern of the Gods is also a shockingly intense finale, with every bar of air being vital to your survival. Facing off after all that with the Okeanos Guardian serves as a great climax too, being easily the best utilization of pulsar combat in the game. Choosing to leave the treasure as the building collapses also helps to drive home the message that this wasn't about the money, but seeing Matthias's dream come to fruition. It's a sweet and engaging narrative that makes every playthrough a joy to experience. I made a note about tedium being a detractor from the first entry's enjoyment, so how does the sequel fare? Well, it depends on what you're referring to. The Marine Encyclopedia is far more forgiving this time around. After clearing the main story, you can click on any creature you don't have to tell you where they are. When it comes to collectathons, I never really liked resorting to guides unless I'm truly stuck or not having fun. It's an optional middle ground reference that doesn't spoil the fun and surprise. Furthermore, you don't have to click on rare RNG-dependent fish 3 times in a row for completion. One click is all you need. Bonus information is purely optional. Thank God for that! Honestly, most completion goals involve other aspects, so you'll typically be completing a bit of everything. I'll just refer back to the Amazon River Dolphin as an example. If you want to get 100% in anything, there is one goal you will need to achieve first. With the saga of the Pacifica treasure now concluded, a new task is laid out before you. Reopen the Cavern of the Gods. To do so, you need to raise 1 million Gs. You will need to grind a lot of money to do this, which is doable, but time-consuming. When you eventually do raise the money, it's nice enough to let you keep half, but I'd rather it just cost $500,000 and skip having to save up $1 million bucks. I mentioned before only having 1 oxygen bar left upon beating the Okeanos Guardian. That was because I actively avoided spending money. Any upgrade you purchase means it takes longer to reopen the cavern. So I made a few concessions like pulsar and bag upgrades, but not much. The Cavern of the Gods is one of the best places to grind for salvage, so at least you can make money back faster, but it leaves you in a bit of an awkward position when you begin the post-game. There's satisfaction in reopening the place up, but you have to pick between getting in sooner and other quality of life improvements. Thankfully, there's no other money requirements beyond stuff to buy from Nancy, so once you open it back up, you're basically all set regarding money. Now, there is a notebook containing quest lines I've mostly skipped over. For the most part, it's not really relevant to note, just side adventures to get certain treasures, dolphins, or find legendary creatures. It's really just more spice to your adventures, and that's part of what makes 100%ing this game so good. You can work towards any completion goal you want to whatever degree and still have fun. If you're ever bored or finding something repetitive, there are other options to pursue. I have no further complaints with finishing the Marine Encyclopedia or Salvage, both have a fun and gradual progression. The only issue I have regarding collection are the coins. The one feature intended to help you find them, the bottlenose dolphin, simply is not effective enough. Typically, I will just give up and look at a guide if I get tired of scouring around for them. There are even a few things I didn't mention like cosmetics, the private reef, and rescuing Snorkel. How could I not mention Snorkel? He's a good doggy. There are only 2 notable complaints I have regarding completion. The first is the animal scenes, which appear in specific conditions and don't really tell you how to find them at all. You will absolutely need a guide, no doubt about that in my mind. One that I remember being a bit out of left field was the sperm whale scene in the Zahab region. You have to swim out to the bottom right of the map where the orcas are, and do so with your orca partner to view it. I guess I can vaguely see how this could occur naturally, but it's extremely easy to miss, especially since there's no practical reason to come back here. Many scenes are easier to come across, and often occur naturally during story progression, so not all of them are hard to find. While there isn't a monetary reason to do this, you are required to get it for our last topic of note. Beside the table hangs a certificate. Along with your general gameplay records, it holds a list of 155 achievements for you to obtain. These are your titles, and while some can be quite fun and rewarding, others are not. If you truly want to 100% Blue World, this will be the last thing you finish, no contest. Clear a section of the story? Get a title. Lead 20 excellent guided tours? Get a title. Discover a dolphin? Get a dolphin to level 2. Get a dolphin to level 3. Get every dolphin to level 3. There's even a few oddballs out there you'll probably obtain by accident, such as leaving 9-Ball Island 100 times. I think most of these are reasonably challenging. You'll certainly get the food one quick if you're doing the Popeye Grenadier strat. As you reach certain thresholds, you'll unlock a special set of cosmetic items in the Poseidon set. Along with a bluish suit, you get to replace your basic equipment with 3 different sea creatures. At 90 achievements is a whale shark that can replace your tank. At 120, 2 manta rays can be equipped instead of fins. At 150, you get your penultimate reward, a singing dragon instead of a BCD. Even if this is 5 less than the total achievements, I think it's fair to allow the player to miss a few. I say that because a handful are absolutely outrageous. Remember that thing I said about being all set with money? If you want to go for all titles, there's a notable caveat. One of them requires you to have 2 million Gs in your wallet at once. Because, sure, why not? I love grinding money for the sake of grinding. Apparently, reopening the Cavern of the Gods wasn't tedious enough. To be clear though, I think most titles are genuinely fair. There are only a few I take issue with, and given there's no special reward for getting all 155, ignoring the absolute worst is without penalty. While I gave the first game 2 kinds of 100% designations, what qualifies as 100% in Blue World is a bit more fluid. Just want to complete the Marine Encyclopedia? That's valid. Want to complete the salvaging coins but disregard the titles? That's valid too. If you really want to push yourself and truly get everything in this game, I have to warn you, there is a single title so poorly designed, so downright meaningless and absurd, you'll have to sincerely ask yourself, is this even worth it? World Traveler. Over the course of the game, swim 600 miles. Well, you're always swimming, so how hard could it be? By the time I completed just about everything else in the game, I only swam about 100 miles. To get a sense for how much I'd have to swim, I decided to do a little experiment. At diving level 19, with all upgrades, my maximum diving time was 200 minutes. I started a dive in the Zahab region, and immediately grabbed onto my dolphin partner. They swim faster than the player, so this maximizes swim distance. Getting level and moving the pointer away from the TV, I was able to keep endlessly swimming in circles at maximum speed without player input. After letting it run the full extent of time, I got these results. Roughly 23 miles in 200 minutes. Doing a bit of math, swimming at maximum speed with a dolphin partner, it takes an hour to swim 6.9 miles. To travel 600 miles, you would need to swim at dolphin speed for roughly 87 hours! You would have to be insane to do that. So I swam 600 miles. Because the method of completion was time-consuming, my main worry wasn't difficulty, it was battery life. Thankfully, the game doesn't pause when the Wiimote is unpaired, letting me simply slide the battery out to save the charge. It took a long time, but I did it. I got every single title in the game. This was my first time ever truly 100%ing Blue World. While there certainly is tedium, it's much less prevalent than in the OG, and tends to purely impact the post-game. The Marine Encyclopedia and Salvage Collection are vastly improved, and the vast array of gameplay options keeps the experience fresh. No matter how committed to completion you are, there are plenty of ways for a player to enjoy the experience. Nostalgia definitely colors my perception, but I can confidently say this is easily a 9 out of 10 game. For me, it's a 10 out of 10, but the mild jank surrounding photo requests and dolphin shows could definitely bother or confuse the average player. From my point of view, these are minor imperfections within one of the Wii's best hidden gems. And there you have it. That's both of the Endless Ocean games covered quite thoroughly. Yup, it's definitely just those two. It's not like we just randomly get a third installment roughly 14 years later or something. Surely that would never happen. And, furthermore, after seeing its reveal trailer and crying actual tears of joy, would I come to be horribly disappointed by the game itself? Ha 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 ha! Like that would happen! While I was initially excited for this game, when I saw the reviews come in, my heart just sank. I'd hoped that, perhaps, the downsides wouldn't be as notable for an avid fan of the series like myself. Alas, not even nostalgia was enough to sway me. Remember how Banjo-Kazooie fans waited ages for a third Banjo game, only for Nuts and Bolts to shatter their hopes and dreams? Luminous is the Nuts and Bolts of the Endless Ocean series. Let's go over my many gripes with this mess of a sequel. Congratulations! You're now a part of Project Aegis. You're tasked with exploring the Veiled Sea and saving the world coral before it's too late. You get to do this with the assistance of the only two characters besides yourself. One is Daniel, who likes salvaging and challenges you to salvage better than him. We don't even get to see his face, ever. In fact, he doesn't even appear outside of the story missions. Even when he does appear, his dialogue is so uninspired and boring, it makes you wonder why he was even included. Genuinely, you could remove this man from the game, and virtually nothing would change. And who's the other character, you may ask? It's an AI. Instead of an actual human being, most dialogue is flatly delivered by generic text-to-speech narration. Sarah, as she's called, is the only voice you'll hear whatsoever. Daniel doesn't even get a voiceover, he just makes bubbly water noises. These two accompany you for the story, which is mostly isolated missions, doing basic tasks essentially acting as tutorials. Even in the original game, sections of the story would have you explore a sub-area or work towards finding the Ancient Mother. Chapter 2 of Luminous, by contrast, makes you swim around an unnaturally square area to click on a couple Crown of Thorns sea stars. That's it, mission complete. What? What was even the point of that? Eventually, after a bunch of exploring and solving all 99 parts of the mystery board, we'll get to that later, you find an artifact that alters the currents and saves the world coral. Hooray! Basically, if the coral dies, life on Earth also dies, because reasons. It's an incredibly hollow climate change allegory, especially considering it's given by an AI chatbot. When you boot up the Wii games for the first time, you're greeted by a gorgeous song accompanying a title card. Luminous doesn't even bother to keep up this trend. You're just plopped right into Chapter 1 with zero fanfare. Not exactly the best first impression. I will admit though, I did have a good time on my first dive. Rather than clicking on each fish individually, the game has you hold the right shoulder button to interact with anything in the center of the screen. This lets you highlight a variety of fish at once. Species now have small and large variants too. There's no practical purpose to this, but it gives you a little pop-up to say, hey, new size record, congrats buddy. On one hand, because of how many fish will typically spawn, this feels like the right call. The gameplay flows a lot better than it would otherwise, had the original way been retained. On the other hand, there's a little part of me that finds this less interesting. Finding a new animal in the Wii games always stuck to me as more personal. There's a simple joy in watching the question marks fade away to reveal the subject's identity. Realistically though, I think the trade-off was worth it to improve the player's quality of life. Salvage got an overhaul too, being closer to Blue World style than the first game. It's kinda like a simplified multi-sensor. Instead of detailed information on the composition and player distance, you get a single yellow dot that lights up if you're facing an item. You also discover what you've salvaged the second you pick it up, so there's not exactly an element of surprise. Functionally, it works well enough, but the implementation doesn't bring me the same level of joy. At the very least, there's no limit to how much you can pick up. On my second dive, things were starting to seem more repetitive, but I was still having fun. Then I went on a third dive, and a fourth, and a fifth. With each subsequent dive, my enjoyment quickly began to deteriorate. There's 3 types of dives in this game: solo, shared, and event dives. One of the main selling points pushed in marketing for Luminous was the online multiplayer. Before I cover that, I want to offer a bit of context around what a typical dive encompasses. Let's say you pick a solo dive. While the first 2 games had a layout deliberate in design, Luminous functions a lot more like Minecraft. That is to say, everything is randomly generated, and has shareable seeds for you to return to. Aside from the basic salvage and encyclopedia filling, creature log filling, your general goal during a dive is to hunt for strange anomalies. When you go near one, a red light will flash in the middle of the screen, and you'll feel a rumble in your controller. The first anomalous creature you find will prompt a message from Sarah, who will tell you how many oddities have been detected. You'll then have to search the map to locate the rest, typically ranging from about 9 to 11 individuals. Upon completion, a UML will appear. These are basically the legendary creatures of Luminous, and whichever one spawns will always do so if you repeat the anomaly hunt in that given seed. The map will give you a red circle around each target, but you need to fill in those sections to actually see them. It can make the initial search take painfully long, which for reference, with a completed map, took me on average 40 minutes. So why would I bother doing it again? Well, each UML will have a rare variant that can appear instead, by random chance. That's right, if you want to 100% the creature log, you have to go through the process of scouring the entire map for a chance of finding a variant. You could easily spend hours swimming around doing the same repetitive tasks, only for it to not even matter because of bad luck. There are 10 forms of UMLs, by the way. Isn't that fun? Thankfully, there is a faster way to deal with this issue. Shared dives allow up to 30 players to dive together, rapidly speeding up the process of finding all anomalies. Back around the time of release, it was often I'd join in and immediately be greeted with Sarah's initiation of the quest. Rather than taking 40 minutes, shared dives can spawn the UML in closer to 10, if not less. While the gameplay is not much different, you can at least notify and be notified of rare items or creatures. You can absolutely tell this was how the game was intended to be played. There is one problem though, and that's the fact there's a 1-hour time limit for each dive session. Solo dives, by contrast, have no such limit. Event dives are a lot like shared dives, having a lot of the same rules, positives, and issues. The difference is, these are preset arrangements made ahead of time. You can dive in as many times as you like, but for some reason, you only get to spend 20 minutes at a time in them. That is not nearly enough time to explore the full extent of the map, which is even stranger since you can re-enter as much as you'd like during the event's allotted duration. Why is this even a restriction? Unfortunately, this saving grace has proceeded to grow worse and worse with each coming day. It's now been almost 2 years since this game was released, so how are the online servers doing? Yeah, as to be expected, not great. Shared and event dives used to get like 8 to 10 other people when I played near launch. For this section, I decided to pop open Luminous and see how things went. When I went on an event dive, there were only 3 people, including me. We didn't get anywhere near close enough to summon the UML within the allotted 20 minutes, so that was a wash. When I played shared dives, I got a connection error. I'd initially thought I was completely alone, but I was met with an even bigger surprise upon re-entry. The seed ended up in this glitched state, and there was clearly another player in the lobby despite not even showing up for me. It wasn't until like 10 minutes in that the game actually registered another player was there. Before that, it was like the game only partially recognized I even had a dive partner. Fascinating. Thankfully, with the help of my glitched buddy Bella B07, I was able to summon the UML in about 25 minutes. Not great, but it was better than 40, I guess. Given such horrendous observations, it's safe to say the online modes can no longer provide their intended experience. If you aren't going for 100% completion, I suppose there's at least some merit to diving with 1 or 2 more people. But at that point, why even bother playing such a tedious gameplay loop? Once it gets old, it stays old. No Haley Westenra, no Celtic woman, what are we even doing? There's a part of me that wants to be cynical and assume the team just didn't bother trying to get them on board. Another part thinks, given it's been 14 years, arrangements for them to get involved again simply just weren't able to materialize. Whichever was true, it's out of the scope of my knowledge. On the bright side, the soundtrack is still able to stand up fairly well on its own. Most of the songs are incredibly relaxing and fit the atmosphere quite well. While I wouldn't put it on par with the original pieces from the Wii games, they still do elevate the experience. Sadly, I must acknowledge one big issue with their utilization. In the original and Blue World, the typically 1.5 minute long pieces will play and simply not repeat. This usually wasn't a problem, as various landmarks would play a set song when you reach it, so you generally get a good mix of music without too much silence. The original functioned similarly, but if you put on a Haley Westenra track, those do loop. You can even listen to a melody of her works while diving. Luminous seems to have missed the memo. You only get to hear the soundtrack during normal gameplay when starting a dive, and at seemingly random intervals from time to time. For a majority of the dive, you're just swimming around in total silence. One last thing I will note is that it does have an original remix of Donut Reef from Blue World. Why not remaster more songs from the first two games? With how many references and reused ideas from the Wii duology there are, you'd think more than one track would make its return. Guess not! The single worst aspect of Endless Ocean Luminous is its over-reliance on RNG. The entire point of the Veiled Sea is rendered mute because it's simply not fun. The progression of both the creature log and salvage log are entirely dependent upon randomly stumbling across new things, a problem which gets worse the longer you play. Generated seeds use a mix of pre-made chunks, including one main area per generation. This means you'll be spending a lot of time swimming around flat squares of sand with barely anything to engage with. Because areas vary in depth too, they often form these square chunks which don't look the least bit natural. What is the point of random generation if everything looks and feels exactly the same? When you've seen the same chunks, valleys, and deep sea areas like 10 times, even brand new seeds feel like a rehashed chore. At that point, just make each dedicated area its own thing without any of the RNG elements involved. At least then I'd feel like I have some control over my game progression. As for the absolute worst thing about Luminous, what really exemplifies its problems better than anything else is the mystery board. In theory, achievements are great. Again, I only had problems with a select few in Blue World. This game requires you to achieve all 99 accomplishments to beat its pitiful excuse of a story, which again, is a matter of luck, not skill. Some do require engagement, like guiding a pufferfish over to a circular structure, but most are like, find a letter, read a tablet, happen to stumble upon a rare item by chance. You barely ever feel like you're in control, just blindly swimming about doing one of two things, clicking on fish and salvaging. That's it. Even in the original game, which I felt didn't always know how to break up the monotony, you could go on guided tours or play with your dolphin buddies. The closest thing Luminous has to an animal partner is the ability to bring random creatures along with you by pressing plus. These are only temporary companions, many of which will despawn if you enter a habitat too different from what they usually inhabit. Carrying a lobster around on your tank is pretty fun though, I'll at least give it that. Thank God there's at least somewhat of a workaround. I mentioned how dive sites have specific IDs to let you return to that given seed. So long as you have a code, it can be accessed by anyone, even those who've never dived there before. While each dive site is randomly generated itself, the animals, salvage, and even their specific spawn locations will always remain the same no matter who used the seed. By the good graces of random internet users, there are a good number of guides online which can help you to seek out specific bits of salvage and hard-to-find species. Had that option not been available to me, I doubt I would have had the patience to achieve 100% completion. Yeah, I actually completed the game in its entirety. It would have been on par with, or even worse than Endless Ocean 1 salvaging, were I not able to utilize others' seeds to their fullest. I mentioned Banjo-Kazooie earlier. Let's take a moment to imagine that type of collectathon if it relied on random generation in a similar manner. Rather than having a variety of levels with set collectibles, you only get to explore one area. Every time you load the level, you'd get random bits and pieces of the original maps strewn about with Jiggies to collect. Once you collect a Jiggy, that section becomes meaningless from there on out. Completed sections will always have a chance to spawn again, and nothing guarantees a new Jiggy will spawn on each visit. You have to collect every single Jiggy in the game to fight Gruntilda. That's what playing Endless Ocean Luminous feels like. For a video described as a love letter, I don't think it would be right to end on such a low note, even if well-deserved. Before I give my closing thoughts on the series, there are a few things that, at the very least, kept me playing until the end. Visually, the environments themselves are a mixed bag, but most of the creatures look fantastic. Some even have rare palette swaps, such as the inverted color orca and polka dot fangtooth. It's a little spice of variety I appreciate. Some of the legendaries from Blue World also make a return, including the Ancient Mother herself. I'll be real, I'm a bit more mixed about this. While it's nice seeing them come back in full HD, Finding the singing dragon and Okeanos Guardian casually swimming about in the deep lessens their importance. I think the biggest downgrade of the reinclusion has to be Thanatos. I've always found him to be one of the most memorable parts of the second game, what with how intimidating he looks and his addition to the story. The fact he's simply too mighty to be calmed by the pulsar further adds to that indomitable reputation. Luminous Thanatos is smaller, poses zero threat to the player, and looks a bit too goofy for me to take seriously. Paired with his weird eyes practically bulging out of their sockets, the excessive amount of red scarring comes off as comical rather than scary. I much prefer the more subtle design of his first appearance. The black and white works wonders with his spiked fins, creating a powerful silhouette. His pitch black, soulless eyes also make him feel more grounded in reality. Even if he's basically just a retooling of Magutapa from the first game, Blue World Thanatos didn't need to try to be cool. The game was able to simply show you he was. You versus the guy she tells you not to worry about. To me, the best thing about Luminous is the inclusion of a plethora of prehistoric marine creatures. You know my paleontology autism was loving this. While I didn't feel much passion put into a majority of the game, some of these ancient representatives dwell far from the public consciousness. Honestly, some may even be the first time a species has ever been depicted in 3 dimensions. The quality of these reconstructions do vary a bit, but most of them are visually appealing to me. Dacosaurus is on the lower end of that spectrum. Despite being a marine crocodile, it's reconstructed more like a mosasaur, and with weird proportions at that. The eye socket also looks highly shrink-wrapped. Definitely not a top choice for me, especially with such a dull color scheme. Lipleurodon, on the other hand, looks fantastic. Flawless other than maybe the teeth. It practically looks ripped right from Walking with Dinosaurs, whose depiction in Cruel Sea has become a gold standard for colorations and reconstructions. At a more accurate size for the animal, it's practically spot on. There's so many lesser known yet interesting species here, even a few were new to me. Some of my favorite inclusions are Rebalatrix, Axelrodichthys, Eusthenopteron, Urinosaurus, Archelon, Diplomoceras, Parapusosea, Anomalocaris, Yasoteuthis, Platyhystrix, Mosasaurus, and of course Lipleurodon as mentioned before. Brief aside, Platyhystrix may look like a Dimetrodon, but it's actually an amphibian that happened to evolve the same type of sail convergently. Also, it lived in swamps, not the middle of the ocean, but whatever. I'm just happy it's here. Yasoteuthis was one of the species I'd never heard of prior. I decided to look at some scientific publications regarding them, and found something interesting. It's one of many large cephalopods known from Cretaceous Japan, being comparable in size to a modern-day giant squid at about 5 meters. There was a paper published recently about a giant octopus, Nanaimoteuthis hagarti, which also lived in the waters off of Japan during the Campanian Age, roughly 83 to 72 million years ago. It reached an estimated 7 to 19 meters, or 23 to 62 feet long. While perhaps a bit too broad a size range, the wear on the beak suggests it was regularly used to crush hard shells or bones. The study even claims it may have been the top predator of its time during the late Cretaceous. As a certified cephalopod enjoyer, this more than made my week. I suppose I owe Endless Ocean Luminous a thank you for helping to expand my knowledge on the subject. Oh, and the citations are in the description below. I've made a name for myself on YouTube talking about Fire Emblem and Love Live. While the latter is a multimedia franchise hard to really compare, I do genuinely love the Endless Ocean series more than the Fire Emblem series. That's no small feat either. I have a significant emotional attachment to several games in that series too. While I've chosen to pass on Fortune's Weave, I decided to buy Luminous despite the poor reviews. I think that speaks for itself. The original Endless Ocean is a great experience that most people will enjoy. Even if you're not looking to complete the game 100%, there's still fun to be had in completing the story and seeing what you can find. If you just want to see every creature in the Marine Encyclopedia at least once, you likely will need a guide and have to deal with somewhat repetitive searching. Still, it's more reasonable than getting all 3 entries, and finding every creature is still a satisfying goal to accomplish. No matter how much time you dedicate to the game, the simple but fun premise will easily win you over, especially in the music department. Even if its sequel is superior to me in virtually every way, the OG still stands the test of time. Blue World is by far the best in the franchise, and offers the greatest amount of gameplay diversity. Each region of the world, arguably even the north coast of Canada, offers something original and unique for the player. The ease at which you can mix up the way you play makes for a superbly fluid experience. More often than not, you will be making progress with virtually every dive, whether it be towards completion, monetary goals, or acquisition of titles. Both the characters and story were memorable, especially regarding anything involving Matthias. Completing this game 100% is by far the most satisfying too, especially the most important mainstays like the encyclopedia, salvage, and coin collections. If you want to play an Endless Ocean game, play Blue World. The game is genuinely a masterpiece. Endless Ocean Luminous is sadly a game I cannot recommend. As negative as I've been about it, there was some genuine fun I had with it, especially with uncovering the prehistoric species. If Luminous was a $10 to $15 Steam game, even if it kept the RNG elements, I think it would genuinely be a good game to play in the background with friends. The relatively simple gameplay is suitable for casual play with others, which suits an easily accessible PC game to chill with over voice chat. The problem is, Luminous is a $50 game stuck on the Switch. That price tag is way too much of an ask, especially for how poorly designed the game's features are. Random generation is something Endless Ocean only pulls off in Blue World with Salvage, doing so by making things a bit more consistent for the player. Seeing what type of item you've found before collection helps to narrow down what you're missing, making the search engaging and far less aimless. Everything being randomly generated in Luminous just fails to serve any functional purpose and actively ruins the experience. Regardless, I still enjoyed playing Luminous to some degree, even if I was ultimately disappointed. I'll give it a 4 out of 10. I want to give a special thank you to Garuda4321 for allowing me to use their footage for this video. Along with the citations mentioned earlier, their channel is linked in the description. I can't really capture footage from my TV, so that's why I had to take some awkward photos of my screen. It was a joy to go back through this series completing each of the games 100%. Technically, because of the salvage thing, I didn't truly 100% the first one, but we'll see if that changes. Hopefully, by the time this video goes live, I'll have conquered that final test of patience. This really isn't my typical video subject, but regardless, I hope you all enjoyed it. Thank you, and happy sailing!